made, and also why we need to get off our phones.
So I started working on it over a couple of years ago, and it was not long after the Ukrainian war broke out. I think it was such a shock for all of us. You know, it's been such a long period of peace that we've all been living through. And I just felt that I really wanted to make a little animation that would feature originally a little girl. It was really the idea of a child and children that are caught up in war. I wanted to draw attention to, you know, how horrific it is for children. And so I came up with this idea for a little storyboard and felt that actually it would be more, people would probably be more empathetic towards a little creature rather than a human. I came up with the idea of it being a little shrew.
I think that's fascinating, that perhaps sometimes some people's empathy is bigger when they see a defenceless animal in a situation versus even a child.
I mean, I think to a certain extent we've all become really desensitized by the violence that we see in films all the time, you know, where people are just being slaughtered, really.
Yeah.
But if a dog were to be killed in a film, everyone would be up in arms. It's a terrible thing to say, but I think there is an element of truth in that.
And we'll come back to that choice of a shrew in just a moment, because that's interesting as well to hear about. But what do you think it was about, what you were hearing about the war in Ukraine, that moved you to perhaps think that there's something you could do to raise awareness, as you're doing with this film, to raise money for a charity that's close to your heart, War Child?
Yeah, I mean, I think war is horrific for everyone, and particularly for civilians, because they're so vulnerable in these situations. But of course, for a child, it's unimaginable how frightening it must be for them.
I suppose, you know, with certainly the war in Ukraine, but I'm obviously now mindful of other wars, and not least what's happened in the Middle East over the last 12 months. It's closer to home when that war broke out, like you say, and it was a surprise for some, not for others. But that piece on the continent of Europe and what we think about with our own stability, it did shake a lot of people to the core.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've all been through very difficult times. These are dark times that we're living in. And I think to a certain extent, everyone is just worn out. I mean, we went through the pandemic and that was a huge shock. And I think really we felt that once that was over, if you could ever say it was over, that we would all be able to sort of get on with some kind of normal life. But in fact, it just seems to be, you know, going from one situation to another, and more wars seem to be breaking out all the time.
I've had the luck to watch this, and to watch it with you, in fact, to see it just before it was ready. I know you were still tinkering with it, but what you said about, I hope I'm going to get this right, is it a Caucasian pygmy shrew?
Yes.
Okay. Why the choice of that very small animal?
They're so tiny, and they're incredibly sweet, tiny little creatures. I had some encounters with shrews over the years because of my cats who would bring them in, and luckily in most cases they were still alive, so I'd be able to catch them and have a quick look at them before I put them out. And they're just incredibly cute little creatures, and they have this nose like this sort of long proboscis. It's almost like a little elephant's trunk that moves. It's very mobile and incredibly charming.
The animation it's very cute, but it also brings home the vulnerability, the defenselessness of people in those situations. And it's very powerful with the song that you picked for it. I mean, when you wrote Snowflake, what were you trying to bring across? I was just looking at some of the lyrics. You know, one of them is, "The world is so loud, keep falling, I'll find you." You know, what were you writing about?
Well, at the time, it was really something I'd written in order to feature my son, who was still a child at that point, and to capture his very beautiful descant voice before he grew up. The idea of this little snowflake falling to ground, and that this person managed to find it and catch it amongst all the other millions of snowflakes that were falling. And a few people at the time said to them what they imagined the song to be was a mother and a soul who were looking to find each other. I thought it was a really beautiful image that actually a few people said that quite independently.
And then you thought perhaps it would work in this instance, the idea of finding each other amidst the rubble, but also sort of hope?
Yes, very much so. I mean, that's one of the key features of the animation, is that there is hope. Hopefully there is hope, and it's something that I think we all need big time right now.
Do you have hope? How do you keep a hold of it? It's a big thing, hope, but it's an important part of being able to function a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think when things get really bad for people, it's kind of the only thing there is to hang on to. It's a very precious thing if it's possible to find it.
There is hope within the animation towards the end. There's also a call for people to donate to War Child and the reality you don't shy away from, that you're drawing people's attention to. But just going back to something you said before about us becoming desensitized to the image and the visions and the scenes of violence. I mean, where do you think that goes? How do we sort of, I don't know, deal with that, do you think?
I mean, when you look at some of the imagery that's in films now, I despair.
Really?
I mean, I think you kind of wonder, why do people want to watch stuff like this? You know, it's strange times.
Do you think music and certainly film, though, to slightly flip that on its head, can perhaps send messages home that the news can't? You know, maybe makes you think about something that you are looking at, but maybe you've become desensitized to. Not
all films are violent or ugly. There are some incredible masterpieces out there, and the same with music. I think music is something that can bring hope to people. Very special stuff, music, and it's one of I think it is the only art form, isn't it, that is invisible. All other art forms tend to work on a very visual plane. There's something about music. If it's something that talks to you, it can really get in deep, you know, really under your skin. It's also, what's clear here is you've been working hard on this, and you've got such a strong sense, like you say, you've been having this in your mind, you've been working on it for 2 years, you've got such a strong sense of your vision and where you want to go, and that seems to be a thread throughout your work, that you have this idea and you stay very clear and stay very true to it. Is that a good way of describing it? Is that difficult to do? Well, I think sometimes when you have ideas, it can take a long time before you can actually get to a point to manifest them. And with this animation, I'd had the ideas over a couple of years ago and started to work with an illustrator, but then we had to stop. So it was parked for about 2 years, and then I started it up again this year. And I think, you know, quite often you hear that with people who make films. They have an idea maybe up to 10 years previously, and they've had to work very hard to get the finance and pull the teams together. And I suppose it's the test of whether you feel the idea is strong enough, isn't it? Otherwise you wouldn't keep hold of it. I think I would be personally held to some sort of very serious account by those listeners to the radio if I didn't ask if you've got some ideas for music at the moment. Are you working on any new material? Not at the moment, but I've been caught up doing a lot of archive work over the last few years on all kinds of different levels, redesigning our website, putting a lyric book together, and I'm very keen to start working on a new album when I've got this finished. I've got lots of ideas. I'm really looking forward to getting back into that creative space. It's been a long time. Really? Is it something that you've been wanting to do for a while? Yeah, it is really, yes. I mean, I think particularly the last year I felt really ready to start doing something new. Wow. You don't speak publicly that often, Kate. I think it's safe to say you've got your lovely website. But it was after a whole new audience discovered you through Stranger Things and running up that hill, going to number one and into the top of lots of people's playlists for the first time. It will be music to many of your fans' ears to hear that. Oh, well, thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. And I think also we talked, you mentioned about, you know, lockdown, and you were getting quite green-fingered and growing vegetables during that time. Yeah. Have you carried on? You know, I was very lucky to have a garden. I think all of us that have gardens just suddenly became so privileged. Yeah, so I grew everything from seed. I'd never done that before, and it was an incredible experience. I sort of grew a small farm. Any shrews? I'm sure there were plenty of shrews running around in there, but I didn't see any. Do you listen to a lot of music to get inspired yourself? No, I don't really. No, I mean, what I tend to do is I watch a lot of films. I love watching films. And actually, during lockdown, one of the things we really loved was listening to Alexei Sale's Imaginary Sandwich Bar. It was so uplifting at a time that was very difficult.
We're happy at Radio 4 here to keep you company, and I will check it out. Just because of the idea of potentially, wanting to, well, as you said, wanting to get back in the studio, make more music. I don't know if you saw this, but your friend and early champion of yours, Dave Gilmour of Pink Floyd, was recently asked in a newspaper interview by a reader about whether he could get you back on stage soon. Did you see this? And he said, Kate Bush is the only person who can get Kate Bush back on stage. I think the show she did in 2014 at the Hammersmith Apollo was some of the best I've seen. We went several nights. I've tried persuading her recently, actually, gently. How's that going?
I'm not there yet.
You can't blame a woman for asking, though.
Well, we loved doing the shows that we did. The audiences were like dream audiences every night. They were really what kept us going. We were so exhausted by the time we got to actually the first night. And it was a really special experience.
I bet it was. And what do you think it is now about potentially wanting to make more music, new music again? Is there something that's sort of changed with you, or some inspiration, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't think so. No, I think it's just that I've managed to get to a point where I've managed to find a good home for all my archived material, which, it was important to make sure that was all sort of properly looked after before I could then move on. And this project, this animation, has taken up a lot of time this year. So really, once this is finished, I'll be ready to start anew.
And do you think it will be different? Do you know what comes out before it comes out? Do you have any idea of how it might sound?
I think it's got to be different, hasn't it? I like to think that all my albums are different from each other. And, I'm sure it will be different. I mean, we've all been through a lot the last few years, haven't we? So
I think what you said about, is it over? I'm always mindful of post-lockdown, those who are still shielding, and also some of the longer-term impacts of that time and how it has changed how people socialise, or how they don't, or how they think about the world. I don't know if you can relate to any of that, but it's certainly something that perhaps many of us haven't processed yet.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're only just starting to come to terms with some of the effects that it's had. And I think, it's like I said earlier, I think everyone's worn out. I also think everyone's kind of changed a bit since lockdown. I think it's really changed people. That and the combination of the bombardment of social media, which I don't really engage with, but I see it in a lot of my friends. It's like people are very different.
How do you think you've changed?
How have I changed? I appreciate little shrews a lot more.
Well, I do now, after having had an education by you, Kate Bush. But is it a greater appreciation of nature?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where you can find a kind of sanctuary that isn't really in a lot of other places. It's an incredible thing, nature, isn't it? You can stand outside and just look at the light, the sunlight. Like the other day was the most beautiful autumnal day, and all the trees were turning, and the sunlight was like golden, and you just think, it is a really incredibly beautiful world that we live in, if we're lucky enough to be able to see those parts of it.
And be safe, and all of those things that we started by talking about. And just to your point about social media, I mean, seeing a beautiful sky and not feeling the need to reach for your phone, to actually take that moment in and be there is the other thing that we're not as good at anymore.
I think we all need to be working on that, to actually be present in the moment. Living your life through your phone is maybe not as exciting.
Well, OK, that's homework from Kate Bush. We will take it. Get off the phone, look at the sky, get maybe more familiar with pygmy Caucasian shrews. It's lovely to talk to you, Kate.
And you too. Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give this animation, have some light shone on it. So thank you very much. And if people feel they could donate even just the tiniest amount to War Child or any other charity that deals with children caught up in war, that would be a really wonderful thing.